The video is targeted basically at anybody who is either thinking about having the new MP3 530, or even owners that might not have had time to get familiar with the scooter and the features. So I'm just going to have a little walk around now and go through the main parts, the controls, and then I'm going to cover those in a little bit more detail later and go through each control and what it does and how you can use it. So you can see here, for example, one thing that's definitely new to a lot of users is the cruise control, and I'm going to cover that in detail in a video. Down here you have the menu buttons, which I'm going to go through as well, and you have your standard indicator, of course. The only negative is you can probably hear this, even though I've selected the left indicator, and this happens when the engine's running as well. There's still a click. So if I indicate left and I'm questioning whether I've actually got my indicator on, I have to look at the screen to make sure that it's on. And really there should be some haptic feedback there, a click to let me know that it's on, and then no click once it's active, which it does on the 400. Down here, of course, you've got the horn, and underneath here you have the reverse control. In fact, let me just move the handlebar so you can see that a little bit easier. So right now we have it set to drive, and we just flick it back to go into reverse, and I'm going to cover that in a video later. Down here we've got the seat release and the gas release, or the petrol cover release. And you also have these on the remote control. So I can release the seat or the petrol, and sorry, that's bike finder. So if I press that, it should light up all the lights. Yeah, there we go. And I prefer to use the buttons for one simple reason I'll show you now. So I'm going to release the petrol cap and hopefully get that in the shot as well. So it's almost instant. Now I'm going to press the petrol cap release button. 1, 2, 3, nearly 4 seconds. So I prefer to just use the buttons on the console. You've got your bag holder, of course, and the handbrake. The handbrake I find is far easier than the older model, the 400 that I have. Literally with one finger I can disengage it or engage it, and then you have the control here, the ignition. So if I just turn the handlebar to the left, press that because the button's close by, and now just lock it. If I walk away, the lights will flash and it locks the bike. Now it's disengaged, or the steering lock is disengaged, and if I turn it to on, you'll see the dashboard turns on, or the screen turns on, and then I can just press the ignition button to start the engine, if I have it turned on, of course. So let's just go around the other side. You'll see here I've got the control for the lights. So at the moment it's just on head beam, and then I can have daytime running lights selected. I just leave that on main beam all the time, and as you'll see on the dashboard, I have daytime running lights set to automatic. Over here on the right hand side we've got the hazard warning lights, ignition, start, stop, and then this is the tilt lock system, which, let me just turn the ignition off. So I'm going to go through that later in the video, but you can turn the tilt lock on or off using this. And what that does in effect is keep the bike, or the scooter, upright. You can see here it's not on a stand. which is one of the great features of this particular, brand of scooter. I had the 400 and now the 530, and the ability to just be able to put the handbrake on, put the tilt lock on and step off the bike is fantastic. You don't have to mess around with a kickstand. There is actually, as you can see here, the main stand, which I use when I'm parking on a night, but typically I'll just use the handbrake and the tilt lock and just leave the bike. Down at the right hand side here you've got the foot brake, which I have used occasionally, but I prefer the finer control of the hand brakes. On the left you've got the rear brake, and on the right the front brake. So some other features to this particular brand of scooter, you'll see here we have some space above the screen. There's a USB charging port. I've tested the output, it's only 500 milliamps, so it's not actually strong enough to put a good charge into a phone, which is why I have a charging bank. So I have the charging bank connected to the USB port, and then my phone's connected to the charging bank. As you can see, I've got plenty of cables in here, and there's plenty of space. The only negative really is no light, which isn't a problem during the day, but at night I can't see in here, and you might have various things in there and just want to get a particular item out. So it's only a minor issue, but something that's easy to fix. I think also the storage space here could be bigger, but that's perhaps going to come in the next model. So some other features unique to the MP3 are, I'll just sit across the bike so I can show you this. Here you've got the ignition switch. So the ignition obviously starts the engine, but it also has a couple of other functions. For example, when you select the reverse gear and then press the ignition switch, it reverses, but again I'm going to cover that in a video. One other thing it does is it allows you to change the mode quite easily. So I'll just start the bike up. So you'll see now it's set to sport mode. I just press this button and it switches to comfort. And I press again and it will switch to eco. So it's a multifunction switch. It's in the manual, but it's just easier to watch a video, I guess. Down here as well, I forgot to mention there's the ASR switch to disable the anti-slip system, which I just leave on all the time. So a couple of other things that I've noticed while riding the bike. The return on the throttle is really, it's not hard, but it's not as gentle as it is on the older models. However, I do use cruise control quite a lot, so I don't really see that being an issue. Although if you were on a long journey using the throttle for a long time, I think that might become an issue. The mode switch as well sometimes decides it's not going to work, and I think that's when you're accelerating, although I haven't tested, but it definitely works if you release the throttle and then press the button, it changes the mode. One other thing I noticed as well was the LCDAS system, the lane change system, actually disabled because I hit a speed hump quite hard, and once I turned the engine off and turned it back on, it was fine, but just something to be aware of. Another minor issue is, as you can see, the ignition is currently turned on, which means the headlamps are also turned on. But on the 400 and the 500, the older models, the headlamps would actually turn off when the ignition was turned off. So it's just something you have to be aware of, and just turn the ignition off when you're not using the bike. I don't think the LED headlamps are going to, drain the battery very quickly, but it's a thought, something to consider when you're using the bike. So let's move on to the space under the seat. As you can see, there's quite a lot of space. In fact, I carry a full set of camera equipment under here when I'm out for rides, and I have one, and I believe I can get a second modular helmet under here. There we go. The only drawback is the seat doesn't close fully, so I have to press it down. My suggestion would be, if you're going to use two modular helmets, don't keep them under the seat for a long time, because it will strain the hinges on the seat. It's probably difficult to see on the camera, but the pillion seat is actually huge. There's more than enough space here for a full adult, and because the new model doesn't have the backrest at the back of the seat, it means that the person's back is literally in line with the top box. And I've had my partner on this with a rucksack, leaning against the top box. I'm sat at the front, and we weren't even squashed up. There's lots of space for two people on the scooter, although the camera angle can be a bit deceiving. The things I found a little frustrating when I was looking at buying this particular scooter was the fact that there wasn't any videos on the entire menu. So here we are. The first thing to notice once it fires up is the screen is actually dark. That's for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's in automatic daylight running lights mode. And secondly, I've set the back screen to go to dark automatically at night or in tunnels, or as you can see here in the garage. The second reason is because if I switch the screen to white, I can't actually video it. I tried. What I'd like to do is just go very quickly through the various menu options here and show you what each do, and also show you a couple of little tricks that I've picked up that aren't even in the manual. One is in the manual, but it isn't described very well. The first thing you'll notice is the trip clock. So we have A, B and C, and the C trip clock is actually automatic, and if I recall, in the manual it says it resets after 2 hours. And then you have A, which is the one I use generally for trips, and then B. So I'm just going to go back to A for a moment. To reset the trip clock, in the manual it says select the trip clock, A or B, and press and hold the menu button. But as you can see, it does nothing. What you have to do is actually scroll down in the menu until you get to the trip mileage, or trip kilometers in my case, then press and hold the reset button. And as you can see, it's already set for 0 because I did a test video earlier. But if you have that particular item selected on the menu and press the menu button, it will reset the trip clock. A little tip: if you go down and have the mileage displayed and then press the menu button, this will actually clear the spanner light, which turns on just to the right of the engine management light. And I only know this because I went to the garage for the first service at 950 kilometers. The spanner was flashing. I had the service done, and the mechanic said he couldn't reset the light until after 1,000 kilometers. So I did 1,000 kilometers, came back, and that's exactly what he did. He selected the total mileage on the menu and then pressed the reset or the menu button here on the handlebars, and here presto, it got rid of the spanner. So that covers the different trip clocks, but the menu in the trip clocks, for example, right now we have total mileage. If I move up, that is the journey mileage, or the mileage since you last set the trip clock. And remember, you can only do this with A and B. C, it's automatic. The time since the last reset, the maximum speed, the average speed, battery voltage. This is live consumption, so while you're driving, you will see the actual consumption of the engine. This next option is the average consumption for the journey, or since you reset the trip clock. And then we have the range, 210 kilometers. So if I take the range, normally I will have the trip clock running, and I'll know how many kilometers I've done. If I recall, I think I've done about 150 kilometers. So if you add that to the range, that gives a total range of 360 kilometers. However, I was driving very conservatively with a friend of mine, doing about 50 kilometers an hour in 60 and 70 zones, because she was on a smaller scooter. The next option, I'll just put that back to A, so we'll go over to the right here. So the next option is the navigator. Now, the navigator is available through the Piaggio app, and you just install the app, connect to the scooter, and everything becomes available. As you can see, I've got these icons at the top. So the first one tells me that the Piaggio app is connected, navigator is connected, the phone's connected, and the battery status of the phone. However, the navigator app is out of date, seriously out of date, because I tested it on some roads that I know very well, and it was telling me that I could drive at 90 kilometers an hour, that was the limit, and the limit was actually 60, and I don't think it's been 90 for at least 2 years. So the next option we have is the phone option, and I don't actually use this, but it is very handy to have it on the screen. I use a smartwatch as well, so if a call comes through or a message, even a WhatsApp, it will display on the screen, but it also displays on the WhatsApp. But it makes life very easy if you're actually in the middle of a journey and a call comes through. You can make a decision on whether you want to stop or not. Music, I've never used. I have tested it. It will connect to your phone. You can play Spotify and it will jump tracks and pause, etc. Not something I'm really that interested in. Then we have ASR set to sport mode. So it's a little bit more lively. It will slip a little bit if you over accelerate round the bend on painted lines, for example, and if you're going over gravel. But it doesn't slip too much. It actually manages to catch itself. I've tested it going round gravelly bends and dirty roads, and it does actually catch. And then the next and final option is this gear icon. But before I go into that, there's something I want to show you on the main menu here. So as it currently stands, we're in sport mode, and there is sport, comfort and eco mode. And once the engine's started, you just press the ignition button to switch those modes. Each one has their own graph. So for example, comfort mode will have the average speed, and eco mode will have, of course, the average consumption. Sport mode here has the torque available, and it's handy to have it there available. But there is actually a way of changing this that isn't in the manual, and it's quite simple. All you do is you just press and hold the menu button, and then press and hold the up key. I think you can do it with the down key as well, and it changes the graph. If I do that again, it will switch to economy, I guess. Yep. So it's telling me that my average consumption over the last 100 kilometers is 32 kilometers per litre. Believe me, that's very, very conservative. Normally I get about 25 to 27, and I'll just press it again. Oops, wait for it to change. There. The only thing is, if you switch the graph, and let's say for example you're in sport mode and instead of torque you want to display economy, if you switch it to the economy graph, then turn the engine off and come back to the scooter later, it will actually go back to the default graph. So that might be something that Piaggio could fix, because obviously if somebody selects a particular graph, it'd be handy to have that there all the time. So let's go through to the main menu. Press and hold the menu button. That'll bring up the menu. You can see we've got various languages available. Configuration, so you can switch the clock from 12 to 24 hours. Units, of course you can have kilometers per hour or miles per hour, and temperature you can change that as well. Just come out of there, and then pairing configuration. This is really just to pair the phone. Once the phone is paired, you don't have to go in here again. Daytime running lights or daylight running lights. I think it's daytime running lights. I have those set to automatic, so they're always on. And then at night, or when the screen's dark, because it detects it's in a dark environment, the headlamps come on automatically. LCDAS, I think this stands for Lane Change Decision Assist System. That's actually quite good. Some people complain about it, that it's a bit of a distraction, but I'm going to cover that in detail while I'm driving the scooter. Performance chart, so those charts that we just discussed, I've activated those, they're available. And then we'll go back to the main menu. So the backlight, we can either have automatic, which I've got it set to. We can switch it to daytime or nighttime, and I just prefer to have it on automatic. And then we have the graphic options, so we can actually change the colours for the different driving modes or the different engine maps. And I'll change the sport mode from digi to analog. I'll show you what that looks like. Out we go, there. So we've got what looks like a normal analog display for the speed, and then the revs will be up the outside. And that's pretty much it for the menu. Hopefully that's been of some use. There's a few idiosyncrasies in there, for example, the ability to change the display graph, the ability to reset the trip clock, which confused me for at least a week, 2 weeks after buying the bike. I just couldn't understand how it was so difficult. I read through the manual, I searched online, I watched videos, there was nothing. And then I went to see the mechanic, he couldn't help me, and I just literally went through every option with the trip clock set displayed, and I went through every option and pressed the menu button, and eventually it reset itself. So that takes us through all the menu system and what's available there. Hopefully that's been of use, and what we're going to do now is take it out for a spin and see what she's like to handle, and I'll also discuss the pros and cons from an owner's perspective, rather than somebody who just gets it for an afternoon or a day to test drive, because even in a day you can't go through all the features that the bike has to offer. So hopefully this will help. One feature that's very useful on the bike is the cruise control. As I showed in the garage how to operate it, now I'm going to show it actually working and how it can be used to accelerate and decelerate as well. So the first thing we need to do, just fire up the engine and wait for a safe space to pull out. Okay, and away we go. So what I'm going to do now is set the cruise control, or rather activate the cruise control. So you can see that it's active, and now I'm going to set it at the current speed. So it's set to 48 kilometers an hour, pressed up twice to increase that to 50. And now what I'm going to do is press and hold the button forward until it increases to 70, and you'll see the bike actually accelerates reasonably quickly as well. And it doesn't accelerate as quickly as turning the throttle, but it does accelerate, and it's far more economical, I find, than just gunning the throttle. So now we're coming into a 50 kilometer zone, so I'm going to press the button back or down until it reaches 50, and you'll see there we're set to 50 kilometers an hour. Now I could have increased that one step at a time, 1 kilometer an hour at a time, or decrease that at 1 kilometer an hour at a time, but sometimes it's just quicker to press and hold the button, but it is a feature that's not advertised. So I thought that might be of use to some people. And I seem to have somebody right up my backside who thinks that 50 means 60. So let's go back up to 70. And you'll see there the speed is set to 70 kilometers an hour. There are actually 3 ways of disengaging the cruise control. The first one is to press and hold the cruise control button to the left for I think 2 seconds. So that disengaged. And the second one is to turn the throttle forward. So that disengages the cruise control. And the third, of course, is braking. Another very useful feature of the cruise control system is, if you'll notice on the screen, the cruise control speed is set at 70 but not active because I deactivated it rather earlier when I came up the hill to the roundabout. However, if I want to go back to that speed, just like a cruise control system in a car, I can reactivate it, and the way you do it on this bike is to press and hold the cruise control forward. So I'm going to do that now, and you'll see that the cruise control became active and it's going to accelerate to the preset speed. And that works both ways. If I set the speed at 50 and I come out of the 50 zone and I'm doing 70 and I want to go back to 50, I can just press and hold the cruise control forwards to reactivate the speed or the cruise control at 50 and release the accelerator, and it will gradually come down to the right speed and hold that speed for me. So right now we're in a 50 zone, so I've deactivated the cruise control and I'm just plodding along at 40 to 50 kilometers an hour. So we're going to go onto the dual carriageway now, and I'm going to show this LCDAS system operating, and you'll see that the first thing it does is, let me put the cruise control on. The first thing it will do is an orange light will display on the dashboard to the left or the right, depending on which side the vehicle's passing on. There's somebody coming up on the left hand side now, and you can see it just came up in orange. However, if somebody is passing and you are indicating, it doesn't come up as a constant orange warning. It actually flashes really fast. And I think I'm going to have to go back around the roundabout to get this. No, I'm not. So somebody's coming up on the left now. I'm going to indicate, and you can see that it was flashing really fast. That's really just an indication that something's coming up in your blind spot and you're indicating to pull out. So it's a warning for you to not pull out, of course. So you'll notice I put the tilt lock on just to keep it upright, switch into reverse gear. Let this car past, or cars. And to reverse, just press the ignition. Use the brake to ease it up, slow it down a little. A system that's unique to the Piaggio MP3 range is the parallelogram suspension. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly because I'm not a mechanic. It's basically a system that provides, in effect, independent suspension to both of the front wheels. And what I'm going to do is just take some bends and show you that system from the perspective underneath, looking in, but also looking forward. And it's an interesting experience. Now, when I first sat on the 400 MP3, the first thing that surprised me was the weight. They're quite heavy. The 400cc that I have is 270 kilograms, and the 530 that I'm riding now is 280 kilograms, which is very heavy for a scooter. However, once you're moving anything more than a few kilometers an hour, you really don't notice the weight. I don't, and I find it handles just as well as a two-wheel scooter. I find that leaning in bends is not so much hard work as some people might think, because of the weight and the size of the bike, and it comes with a number of advantages. For example, I was out with a friend of mine. He was on a two-wheel bike that belongs to another friend of mine, and he noticed when we were taking bends that sometimes I would change my course in the middle of the bend, and he said you just can't do that on a two-wheel bike, but on this I can. Another thing that he noticed was I was going over rough or gravelly areas where he wouldn't, and it made absolutely no difference to me. Once or twice the back wheel would skip, but because it's got the ASR system that captured those slips, so the bike didn't fall. Another huge advantage is riding in the wet. Not that it gets wet very often here in the south of Tenerife, but it does. And my riding style changes very little. I will obviously give more braking distance, because unfortunately when it's damp or rainy here there are quite a lot of accidents. People tend to drive far too close, and that was one of the reasons why I moved from a 125 to a 400 and now a 530, because I was just tired of people tailgating me, and on a 125 it's extremely difficult to get away. And another thing that I noticed was riding in the rain. I would take bends. At first I would take them upright or just lean a little bit, but once I got familiar with the scooter and the extra grip and stability that the three wheels gives me, I started leaning further into bends. Right, third time lucky. This is the third attempt I've had at making this video. I bought a new Insta360 1RS 4K edition, which is mounted right here, and for some reason the audio kept cutting out. So what I've done is I've actually swapped the camera body with the second camera I bought with the first one. Hopefully the audio will be better. You might notice as well I'm using my right hand because I'm not touching the throttle. I have the cruise control set. So let's get on with the reason behind doing this extra piece of video. Previously I've talked about setting the cruise control and the reverse gear and the menu systems, and basically covered all the technical aspects of the bike, which if you knew me would be obvious what I would lead with, because I'm a geek. I've been a geek for about 35 years working in IT and web design, etc. So I tend to focus on the technology, but what I want to focus on now is the ride and the handling. And as you can see, I'm leaning into bends without any issues. It doesn't even occur to me that there are two wheels at the front. Not an issue at all. Certainly when I'm riding over rough ground, like loose ground and gravel, for example, I am a little bit conscious of it, but not so much as I would be on a two-wheeler. I actually moved from a 125 to the MP3 400, and the difference is night and day. Obviously it's more powerful. I think the 400 is 39 horsepower, and now recently I've moved up to the 530, which is 44 horsepower, and it's a really comfortable ride. I tend to do a lot of round town driving, which I was told the 530 was too big a bike for that, too powerful, which I disagree with. It's nice to have that extra power pulling away from junctions. It's nice to have the power there on hand when I want to enter a roundabout quickly, and it's also really handy to have something a little bigger, a little bit more powerful for country road driving, because you could be riding for an hour to 2 hours without stopping, and for a small engine that's a lot of work. And another bonus is the fact that, for example, this road that I'm on now, the TF28, runs from Los Cristianos in the south to Santa Cruz, the capital, in the northeast corner of the island. And it's a beautiful ride, but sometimes I've gone on the ride and I've had to return to the south for work or to visit customers, and it's been a bonus having something with a bigger engine to just drop down onto the motorway, set the cruise control, and I'm back home within 30 minutes, a little bit longer. So back to the ride. At the moment I'm just setting the cruise control at 50 because I'm riding through towns. Wanted to let you see what it's like to ride. I'll insert some video as well of the ride up through the mountains, which is not far from where I am right now, but the audio kept cutting out, so I couldn't use the audio from that video. But for me personally speaking, I think the MP3 as a format, a three-wheeler, is fantastic because of its size, its comfort, the stability that it offers when it's raining, when the roads are damp or wet, and the space that it provides under the seat, which I need to show you. I'm going to show in the garage. I can actually get 2 full modular helmets under the seat. I do have to press the seat closed, but they will fit. And then of course I've got the top box as well. I opted for the Shad 59, even though I never collapse it down. It's always fully expanded because I've usually got a lot of things in it. One other thing that's struck me about the MP3 range, both the 400 and I think more so the 530, because of the change in the design and the daytime running lights, is the, how can I put this, the lack, or the number of times I don't get noticed by a driver pulling out at a junction is reduced. On the 125s it would happen to me quite often, and I think that's partly down to the size of the bike and the speed, and also driver's lack of attention. But I do find on the larger model, the MP3 400 and the 530, that you get noticed a lot more easily, especially with the 530, because it has LED lights, so they're quite bright even during the day. It would be impossible for a driver to say that they didn't see me. But that said, I always cover my brake when I'm coming up to a junction and there's a car ready to pull out, even if they're looking at me. But I'm going to cover that in another video. I'm going to ride the scooter around town and just talk to you about the reality of riding a scooter around Tenerife and what you have to be aware of. This is the road that I actually shot the first video on, and the second, where the audio didn't work. So hopefully the audio is working this time, because I've swapped out the camera bodies. This road actually leads up to the mountain, up to Villaflor, which is the highest village here in Tenerife, and folklore does tell that it's the highest village in Europe, but I'm not convinced of that. You'll have to look it up. I think the village itself sits at around 1,400, 1,500 metres. There's a lot of history there. There is a church dedicated to Hermano Pedro, or Brother Peter, and there's a pilgrimage from the south of Tenerife. I think it's near the airport, and the path that runs all the way from there right up to the top of the mountain stops in Villaflor. So here's a good example of how she handles around the bend. and I could have taken that bend faster, I could have leaned over a little further. I don't think I actually pushed this bike to its limits, and I don't think I'd want to be honest. I'm quite comfortable with her, the way she is, the handling, the setup, and the fact that I can climb up to the base of the mountain at about 2,000 to 2,200 meters, and it doesn't feel as though I've lost any power at all. And years ago I used to ride or drive a 2-litre petrol car up the mountain, and as soon as I got to about 1,000 meters, you just forget about overtaking or even using the power. They're designed to be driven at sea level or close to sea level. This, on the other hand, I can quite happily get up to and hold 70 kilometers an hour even up the mountain without any issues. Another big difference between the older models, the 400, the 500 and the newer 400 and 530, is the pillion seat, which I haven't mentioned. The pillion seat on the older model has it's not really a backrest, it's more a support right at the back of the seat, which is fine if you're using the scooter without a top box. But the first time my partner got on to the 400, she noticed that the backrest meant that she had to move her bum forward in the seat. So she still had lots of space on the seat, however the backrest for the top box was then further back, so she felt as though she was basically leaning back on the bike. And on the last couple of rides we did, she would wear a rucksack with a cushion in it. that kind of solved that issue. On the newer models there's no backrest at the back of the seat, so if you put a top box on the back of the bike, it's basically nice and vertical for whoever's at the back, and it gives them a lot more space. There's like an extra 6 inches, 15 centimeters or so of space to sit on, but it also means that space can be used for the pillion, the co-pilot as they called them in Spanish, to wear a rucksack. So even more storage space. Fantastic. I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but the views up here are really quite nice. At the moment we've got a little bit of a kalima, which is the dust that comes over from the Sahara. And you probably notice the condition of the roads. Absolutely spectacular for bikes, for biking. A lot of cyclists live here in Tenerife, and a lot travel to Tenerife to cycle, and to cycle at altitude, so that they can build up the resistance or the stamina cycling at altitude. And as you can see from the condition of the roads, that's why as well. The altitude and the condition of the roads just makes for a perfect training arena. But it also makes for perfect riding a bike, a motorbike, a scooter. And you don't have to worry so much about the condition of the roads and if there are potholes. You do have to keep an eye out for rocks, because there can be rocks in the middle of the road. And I will quite happily get on my scooter and travel to the other side of the island on these roads, and it just makes for a beautiful day out